Hey, Mountainside. Hope your week is going well. Sitting in my office, looking out my window, just wondering, is it going to rain or snow? Last week we had such crazy weather, or is it just going to blow away? Well, having lived in New Mexico since 1968, nothing surprises me when it concerns our weather. That old saying, if you don't like the weather, just wait a few moments, it certainly holds true in our beautiful state. I know personally I've seen some pretty remarkable weather changes, and they've happened right before my eyes and happened very quickly. Hey, it was great to be back Sunday and see everyone after our time away, especially seeing some faces that I've not seen in a while. It was so good to see you back, and it sure warms the heart. In our rolling announcements on the screen, there was a correction I was supposed to make, but I didn't write it down and it slipped by me. But if you didn't know already, our brother Tom Davis, praise God, he's not in the hospital. He came home the latter part of last week, and we're certainly thankful for that. One other announcement that I heard through the grapevine from a close relative is that our brother John Beatty, he may have a new surgery date. And when I get some more information, I'll certainly pass that on. But this I know is certainly a praise God thing. This past Sunday in our cafe class, we were in the final chapter of First Timothy, chapter 6. And this chapter will quickly remind you how the world, how humanity has never really changed. People have always had basically the same tendencies, whether they be good or bad. And if one does not find a way to keep themselves in check, they'll quickly find themselves going down some very dark roads of life, even believers. And this happens to believers who can't keep their focus on the main thing, Jesus Christ. You see, just because one is a believer, it doesn't mean that we do not continue to have those temptations from the world to be this, to be that, or the desire for more of whatever it is the world has to offer. And many times it's just money, wealth. But Paul here uses some forceful language to stress the importance of Timothy being very bold in his response to the false teachers there in Ephesus. And he uses words like urge, command, teach, and instructions, which basically serve to reinforce what Paul knows needs to happen for the good of the Lord's church there in Ephesus. And Paul talks to those who are preaching more so to make money than they are, you know, why someone should actually share the gospel, and that is simply to save souls. This is just plain greed, and it's pretty obvious that this still happens in our world, in our society today, and these things happen more often than not because someone is enjoyed some prestige and power from this position, and that generally leads, if they don't guard their heart, it leads them to seeking more wealth, and then the cycle just continues on and on. Paul knew this had to be stopped, and sooner rather than later, and he certainly didn't want Timothy to be deceived by some of these, let's just call them very smooth operators. They were good at what they did. Sadly, it's just what they were doing was so very wrong. And there's much that can be gleaned from this text, but I wanted to look at something, basically, what I think is the core problem behind so much of the darkness in our world today, and many times even in the Lord's church. And it concerns everything about the love of money, wealth, seeking wealth. Just look at verse 6 of chapter 6, and it said this: But godliness with contentment is great gain. Paul here takes two words from verse 5, godliness and gain, and he gives us the truth of both. These false teachers in this area, they looked at godliness as a means to financial gain. And the truth of the matter is that godliness itself is great gain in itself when it's accompanied with contentment. In other words, godliness does not come and go with the uncertainties of one's material wealth. Not at all. Rather, godliness with contentment is the wealth, completely independent of one's bank account or their personal possessions. And when one sees these three components, godliness, contentment, and gain, the way that our Father, the way our God intends, it will most certainly open one's eyes to this abundant life that Jesus offers. And Paul talked of godliness back in chapter 4 of 1 Timothy as he basically contrasted the characteristics and the consequences of godliness and godlessness. Godliness requires training and helps one to develop true Christ like spiritual qualities, which is evident in one's character that is willing to serve the world around them, to serve others. Contentment, just like godliness, grows from our attitude towards living uh, God's way. A Christian knows that they can be content because they know this is ultimately sufficiency in Jesus Christ. And then there's gain. Those prophets that motivated the false teachers would never, they would never last, nor would they satisfy. To have true gains has everything to do with eternal values. And this is that place where we realize that everything is the Father's, and He simply just blessed us to be the stewards of it. And these things are the key to true spiritual growth and personal fulfillment, contentment. And this will happen when we honor God in all that we do and center our desires on godliness. Hey, thank you for tuning in this evening. I hope you find this message encouraging, uh, but have a blessed rest of the week.